Stephanie White has found herself in Charlottesville. And I didn't even trip off this earlier today. But shout out to Ben Daniel, man, because it had dawned on me, which I think they lying, that technically, based off what they're saying, Caitlin Clark is not cleared to play 5-on-5. It looked like fans is catching on too. One fan said, "No one believes a single word the biggest liar in the women's basketball landscape, aka Stephanie White, had to say. I'm not saying this. They said this 20 hours ago. Stephanie White, this is you right here. Hold up. Wait a minute. Let me get out of this full screen here. This is when? May the 26th. This was Stephanie White. Listen.
That's not just some random fan talking. That's the community finally saying what everyone's been thinking for months. Stephanie White has been caught in what might be the most documented cover-up in WNBA history. And this time, actual medical professionals are stepping forward with receipts that completely demolish her story. You've been watching this unfold since July. Many of you have been saying something felt off about how the Indiana Fever handled Caitlin Clark's injuries. The timeline never added up. The press conferences kept contradicting each other, and now, doctors are going on record to expose exactly what happened behind closed doors. This isn't speculation anymore. This is medical professionals publicly calling out a coaching staff for misrepresenting injury timelines, and the evidence they're presenting paints a disturbing picture of how far the Fever were willing to go to control the narrative around their franchise player. If you believe transparency in professional sports actually matters, smash that like button right now. It tells us you're here for the real story, not the PR version they tried to feed everyone. Let's start with what we were told versus what actually happened. Back in May, Caitlin Clark suffered a left quad strain. The official word from Stephanie White: minor injury, day-to-day. She'll be back before you know it. Standard coach speak that nobody really questioned at the time. Then July 5th rolls around. Another injury. Left groin strain this time. Again, Stephanie comes out and says it's minor. Nothing to worry about. Caitlin's tough. She heals fast. Just needs a few days rest. Fans started getting suspicious because groin injuries don't typically resolve in a few days. But the Fever kept insisting everything was under control. July 16th. Now we're talking about a right groin strain. Different side entirely. That's 3 separate muscle injuries in less than 2 months, and Stephanie White is still calling them all minor setbacks. At this point, Caitlin's body was practically screaming for extended recovery time, but the official messaging never changed. Here's where it gets interesting. Sports medicine doctors who had zero connection to the Fever organization started analyzing these timelines publicly, and what they found completely contradicted everything the coaching staff had been saying. Reading between the lines of the medical evidence reveals a pattern that's impossible to ignore.
She basically says Caitlin Clark is not cleared. Now, I did the first video. Now, this is from another doctor back in July, breaking down a time frame of Caitlin Clark injury. Listen to this. This was on July the 16th. Now, this is when Caitlin Clark injuries happened, right? It says Caitlin Clark injury history, left quad strain, May the 26th, left a groin strain, July 5th, right groin strain, July 16th. He said initially he thought the strain she suffered last night was a re-injury, but realized that it wasn't. Obviously, we know that. Now, this was all the reports that was released by the Indiana Fever front office. Out status. This was all within
3 distinct injuries, 3 separate muscle groups, all within a 7-week window. And according to the Fever's official statements, all of them were minor and day-to-day. But medical professionals were looking at this and immediately recognizing something wasn't right. The first red flag came when doctors started explaining that groin strains, by their very nature, are never day-to-day injuries. The muscle structure involved, the recovery process required, the rehabilitation protocol necessary to prevent re-injury. None of it aligns with a few days of rest. Let that sink in for a moment. A medical professional with no agenda, no connection to the team, just analyzing the public information and saying flat out, the official timeline doesn't match medical reality. groin strains require weeks, not days. And Caitlin had multiple groin strains across both sides of her body. You were onto something when you noticed how Stephanie White kept changing her story. First it was a minor strain, then it was day-to-day. Then suddenly, we're hearing she's not cleared for 5-on-5 scrimmages yet. But somehow she can travel with the team and sit courtside. Make that make sense. The inconsistencies kept piling up. Fans started tracking every press conference, every interview, every statement from the coaching staff, and what they discovered was a masterclass in contradiction. Stephanie would say one thing on Monday, then by Thursday, she'd be telling reporters something completely different, acting like nobody was paying attention or keeping receipts. But the WNBA community was absolutely keeping receipts. They had timestamps, video clips, screenshots of official injury reports. And when you lay all that evidence out chronologically, the story the Fever were trying to tell completely falls apart. Here's what really validated everyone's suspicions. Multiple sources started whispering that Caitlin wasn't even using the Fever's medical staff for her evaluations. She was going to her own doctors, getting independent assessments. Think about what that means. Your franchise player, your rookie sensation who's breaking viewership records and selling out arenas, doesn't trust the team's medical professionals enough to let them handle her recovery. That should have been the biggest red flag imaginable. If your star player is seeking outside medical opinions, that's not normal procedure. That's someone who's lost confidence in the organization's ability to prioritize her health over their playoff ambitions. And the Fever's response to all this scrutiny? Double down on the same robotic talking points. We're taking it one day at a time. She's in good spirits. We'll know more after the imaging. Stephanie White delivered those lines so many times that fans started making compilation videos with counters tracking how many times she'd used the exact same phrases. The timing of everything makes it even more suspicious. All of this was happening right when the Fever were fighting for playoff positioning. The pressure was mounting. The season was slipping away. And suddenly, their generational talent is dealing with multiple injuries that are all somehow minor and day-to-day, despite medical science saying otherwise. Connecting the dots reveals a pretty clear picture. The organization needed Caitlin back on the court as soon as possible. The PR strategy was to downplay the severity, maintain optimism, and keep fans believing she'd return any day now. But the medical reality didn't match the messaging, and eventually, actual doctors started calling them out publicly. What happens next is where this story gets even messier, because once the medical community started speaking up, everything the Fever had been carefully constructing began to unravel in real time. Now here's where I need you to get involved. Drop a comment right now telling me if you think the Fever's front office knew exactly what they were doing, or if this was just incompetence. Because the evidence we're about to walk through suggests this wasn't an accident. This was strategy. The medical professionals who started analyzing this publicly weren't just offering casual opinions. They were providing detailed breakdowns of recovery timelines, citing clinical research, explaining the biomechanics of groin injuries, and why the Fever's version of events made zero medical sense. One sports medicine doctor laid it out in terms anyone could understand. When you have a quad strain followed by groin strains on both sides, you're looking at a compensation pattern. The body is trying to protect the original injury site, which puts stress on surrounding muscle groups. That's not three separate freak injuries. That's one injury that was never allowed to fully heal. But Stephanie White kept insisting these were isolated incidents, random bad luck, just minor setbacks that happen to occur in rapid succession. Except that's not how the human body works. And medical professionals were more than happy to explain why on every platform they could find. The Fever were essentially playing doctor without a medical degree, and when actual doctors started calling them out, their response was to say nothing, no clarification, no updated medical reports, just silence while the evidence mounted against them. Let's filter out the noise and focus on the timeline discrepancies that can't be explained away. Stephanie White said multiple times that Caitlin was day-to-day. Medical experts said a minor groin strain requires a minimum of 2 weeks for safe return to play. Caitlin missed significantly longer than that, which means either the injuries were more severe than reported, or they were holding her back for reasons that had nothing to do with medical necessity. Fans noticed something else that the Fever probably hoped nobody would catch. During several press conferences, Stephanie would talk about Caitlin being almost ready, but in those same interviews, she'd mentioned they were still waiting on imaging results or additional evaluations. You can't be almost ready if you haven't even completed the diagnostic process yet. That's not medical caution. That's strategic messaging. The breaking point came when reporters started asking more specific questions. Instead of accepting the generic day-to-day responses, journalists began pressing for actual details. What specific imaging was done? What did the results show? What's the rehabilitation protocol? And every time those questions came up, Stephanie would deflect with the same vague answers that revealed absolutely nothing. We're getting into territory where multiple sources are suggesting the Fever had a very specific reason for stretching out Caitlin's recovery time. Not officially confirmed, but the breadcrumbs lead to a coaching staff that was frustrated with how much the offense revolved around their rookie. The moment Caitlin touches the ball, everything shifts to accommodate her gravity on the court. And some people within that organization reportedly weren't happy about it. If these reports are accurate, they used the injury situation as an opportunity to test their system without her, to see if they could establish an offensive identity that didn't completely depend on their franchise player. That's a bold strategy, except for one small problem. It allegedly involved misrepresenting medical information to justify keeping a healthy player on the bench. The WNBA community is buzzing about something else that came out this week. Claims that Caitlin was cleared by her personal medical team weeks before the Fever officially announced she was ready to return. If that's true, we're not talking about being overly cautious with an injury. We're talking about a decision that had nothing to do with her health and everything to do with organizational priorities. Fans absolutely lost it when that information started circulating. Social media lit up with theories about why the Fever would risk damaging their relationship with their most valuable asset. Some pointed to playoff desperation, others suggested coaching ego. But everyone agreed on one thing: you don't lie about a player's medical status and expect to maintain any credibility. The fallout has been exactly what you'd expect. Every single post the Fever make on any platform gets flooded with comments demanding transparency. It doesn't matter if it's a birthday message for a staff member or a congratulations post for an intern. 50 people will show up in the comments asking why they lied about Caitlin's injuries. That's what happens when you break trust with your community. Once people see you as dishonest, every single thing you say gets questioned. Every statement gets scrutinized. Every press conference gets fact-checked in real time by thousands of people who remember exactly what you said last week. Other players around the league have started dropping subtle hints on social media. Protect your body. They'll sacrifice your career for their agenda. Everyone knows exactly who these posts are about, even if names aren't mentioned. The message is clear. What happened with Caitlin could happen to anyone if organizations feel comfortable manipulating injury information. Even media members who initially backed the Fever's version of events are now changing their tune. Articles that once defended Stephanie White's handling of the situation have been quietly updated or taken down entirely. Journalists who built relationships with the coaching staff are suddenly writing pieces about credibility crises and transparency issues. Here's the part that should concern everyone beyond just Fever fans. If a team can misrepresent injury timelines for months, use medical uncertainty as cover for organizational decisions, and face minimal consequences, what's stopping other franchises from doing the same thing? This isn't just about Caitlin Clark and Stephanie White anymore. This is about setting a precedent that either holds organizations accountable or tells them they can get away with it. The doctors who exposed this whole situation aren't backing down. They're doing interviews, writing articles, breaking down the medical evidence for anyone willing to listen. Their message is consistent. Professional athletes deserve honest medical assessments. And when coaches start making decisions that contradict medical advice, someone needs to call it out. Caitlin Clark is healthy now. She's back on the court doing what she does best. But the damage to the Fever's reputation is done. Stephanie White wanted control over the narrative, and instead, she lost all credibility. The coaching staff thought they could outsmart their own fans, and they forgot that the internet never forgets. This whole saga proves something we should have already known. Some organizations care way more about optics than actual honesty. They'll craft perfect PR statements, while the truth is completely different. And eventually, someone with actual expertise will step forward with evidence that tears down everything they built. If you want to see how we break down the next chapter in this story, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because the Fever's problems are far from over. The league office is reportedly looking into how injury information gets reported, and that could have massive implications for every team. We'll keep following this. We'll keep asking the questions they don't want to answer, and we'll keep bringing you the real story behind the headlines. That's what this channel does. Now you know the truth. Stephanie White got caught. The doctors exposed the timeline, and the fans were right all along.